In recent years, there's been a lot of buzz related to the various sterilization packaging methods now on the market. From disposable blue wrap to traditional rigid containers and the OneTray sterilization system, along with the buzz, we've seen white papers, marketing campaigns, and a fair number of email blasts related to the various options. The purpose of tonight's event is to gather representatives from each of these various packaging methods and engage in a moderated panel discussion in an attempt to answer some of the questions that many sterile processing professionals have on their minds every day. Our expert panelists for this evening include Marcia Frieze from Case Medical, if we can get a round of applause for each panelist. Joe Hannibal from Halyard Health. And Barbara Harmer from Innovative Sterilization Technologies. I would also encourage you now to review the trifold that was handed out at the check-in, or left out, I guess, at your seats, which includes full biographies for each of our guests detailing their extensive experience in the medical industry. And now we will begin our discussion entitled Packaging Method Myth-Busting. Panelists' answers will be timed. I will hold up cards to make them aware as time is expiring, and the time limit will be noted by the ringing of a bell, at which time the panelists are expected to finish succinctly and allow for the next question. Questions will be posed by hosts of Beyond Clean, Hank Balch and Mike Matthews.
All right, good evening. Our first question is the warm-up question of the event and also the summary question of the event, which is, what would you say is the biggest myth in the industry related to packaging methods? And the question is directed first to Marcia.
Good evening, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you for including Case Medical and myself in this discussion. Simply put, the biggest myth is that all containers and packaging materials are the same, that all result in the same outcome and level of safety. However, there are substantial differences when it comes to cost, quality, and outcome. It's up to the user to understand the features and benefits of each packaging method, as well as the ongoing costs and concerns. For example, containers are reusable. Wrap is consumable. There are costs involved with both. The upfront cost of buying a container, and then the ongoing cost for consumables. And then when wrap is considered, it's an ongoing expense, basically without a payback. Consider the cost of the wrap, the tape, the corner protectors, the dust covers, and consider reprocessing issues related to tears and the cost of disposal of wrap, which is not biodegradable. No, all containers and packaging materials are not equally safe. One needs to consider the useful life of the container, how compatible it is with various sterilizers and devices, and certainly how safe it is to use, how it's manufactured, whether components are sold a la carte, the frequency of repair and replacement, and the integrity of the contents for its intended purpose and for later use. One or two container manufacturers challenge the current standards and guidelines for terminal sterilization by claiming that wet loads are safe for later use. While most container manufacturers follow AMI standards, which limit recommendations for IUSS, formerly called flash sterilization, because of wet loads, others may reinterpret the standards.
And next to Joe.
So, thanks, Hank. I would also like to thank the Beyond Clean team and everyone here. Really an honor to be invited, so thank you. Biggest myth is actually threefold. One, rigid containers seal are not reliable over time. Two, breach identification is near impossible with rigid containers. And three, the burden of ownership is actually severely understated. The evidence is mounting. There have been not one, not two, not three, but 4 unique studies which have all arrived at the same conclusion, and that's that rigid containers do not provide a reliable seal. We have in front of us not only scientific, but also empirical evidence that strongly supports this. Clinical, though, is not the only area where the veil of superiority for containers is misguided, whether it's financial, from an efficiency standpoint, or even environmental. What you see is not what you always get with containers. The reality of the matter is, if you're doing everything the container companies are asking you to do to run a clinically sound container program, it's hardly sustainable, if at all. When we take a deeper look at how container programs should be run, it becomes clear that it's at odds with today's healthcare environment. Healthcare, and the OR specifically, is a world governed by checklists. From checklists to timeouts, it's all in place. And we have to ask, what is the process check to make sure that containers have maintained sterility? From our viewpoint, there is none, and we have to ask, is that okay?
And then to Barb.
Sure. Thank you for having OneTray here tonight, and it's a pleasure to see all of you on a Tuesday evening here. So I'm going to tell you that the myth that I would like to talk about is one word: moisture. And I'd like to take you through, for those of you that know me in the room, know that I have a past history of being a regulator, so I'm a pretty black and white person. And so taking you right through the actual annals of what does it say. And the definition of terminally sterile does not include the word moisture. Multi-society position paper that dates back to 2011 says that terminal sterilization cycles, where instruments are sterilized within containers, wrappers, or primary packaging, designed to maintain the instrument's sterility and allow the devices to be stored for later use. AMI ST79, 2017, the process by which the product is sterilized within a sterile barrier system that permits storage for use at a later time. And AORN 2018, a process by which the product is sterilized within a sterile barrier that permits storage for use at a later time. And CMS goes on to let you know that it has the exact same definition. We've done extensive literature searches and have found no peer-reviewed articles that show that retained moisture in a packaging system is a pathway for microbes. At best, AORN has the subject listed with limited evidence. AORN's model, which has been used since 2012, considers the quantity and the quality of the collective evidence. Only one category is lower than limited evidence, and that is benefit balances with harms. Interesting to note that these two categories are listed as no research. Translation, no meaningful research has been found in the literature. Also, the rating employs a quality rating of A, B, and C. High for A, B for good, C for low. Combining the numerical score with the letter rating gives the reader or user the strength and quality of the evidence. AORN, again, who started this in 2012, within their recommendations currently in 2018, says a rigid sterilization container should be used, cleaned, inspected, repaired, and maintained according to the manufacturer's written IFU. So, in 2018, if you look at the AORN recommendation, it gives the AMI document a 4C, which is the lowest rating that you can get. And so that, again, is in regards to literature search and the evidence of moisture in sterilization for terminal sterilization. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. So we're going to move into the more targeted questions, and
Could we have rebuttal, please?
not at this time. I'm sorry. This is that was just a 3-minute response or a 3-minute intro for each person. So the targeted question number 1 will be directed to Marcia. After she has 3 minutes to answer the question, there will be a 60-second response from Joe and a 60-second response from Barbara, and then Marcia will be allowed 30 seconds to respond to the responses. Marcia, your question is, what impact do poorly maintained rigid containers, including retention plates, locking mechanisms, and gaskets have on the ability for the method to serve as a true sterile barrier?
I think that's a relatively easy question. Any device, any piece of equipment, even your own cutlery, if not well maintained, is not going to function well. So yes, there are issues with maintaining sterilization containers, but the goal as a manufacturer is to design and manufacture a product that is easy to use and even easier to maintain. For example, our filter retention plates are completely interchangeable, and our aluminum case and lid are interchangeable too. Furthermore, they're manufactured from an aircraft grade of anodized aluminum, which means if you continue to clean them with a pH-neutral detergent, they'll have a very, very long life cycle, free of repair and non-corrosive for years of continuous use. The condition of the container is as important as the ongoing inspection to maintain its true barrier. We were talking about this a little bit this afternoon, that whether you use wrap or you use container, that an inspection of the materials is absolutely crucial. Containers could have dents or problems with gasket seal or whatever, but wrap can have ongoing problems when it comes to punctures and tears, separation of tape, and so on. So I think it's important to realize, as I said earlier, that not all container and wrap materials are equal, that there are different levels of quality and different levels of concern when it comes to maintenance and repair. So a very important thing is to really, again, to do your due diligence and really get a sense of that the product that you're buying is really of the utmost quality and is going to maintain its useful life. A container that has a compromised seal will affect the barrier, sterile barrier, and compromised contents. That's why built into the design of our container was to have a gasketed knife edge fit between lid and base, to have an offset filter retention plate that's gasketed so there could be no strike through, and also to provide a container that will truly last, that will give the contents the utmost in protection. Because when an instrument set becomes compromised, it places the patient at risk, angers the surgical team, as well as the family or the patient, and it may also affect the entire surgical schedule for the day, not to mention the cost of reprocessing. I'd like to further add that the integrity of a container is also dependent on cleaning it after each use. And I know that sometimes has been an issue, probably from our friends next door, because wrap doesn't have to be cleaned, but then wrap has to be disposed of. Wrap needs to be inspected very carefully. And that Case Medical has a validated process, a very easy process to clean, which we can talk about later.
Thank you. 60-second response from Joe.
Thank you. So the question subtly hints that container failure is driven by human error. The reality is there's a potential intrinsic design flaw with the container itself. ARA study showed a drastic reduction in performance over time, and it also showed that new containers had challenges passing that test. Additionally, visual inspection is simply not enough. The Cabin study showed that 76% of containers which failed actually passed visual inspection. These proof points shift the blame from the human element to the design of the device itself and to the expectations of maintenance and inspection, which frankly are not realistic in today's healthcare environment. The important thing to take away is this: we need to start shifting our mindset from container failures being something we can 100% impact and start realizing that we have a real question to answer around the seal itself.
Thank you. 60 seconds from Barbara.
Maintaining sterility is the name of the game, and it's imperative that the original set of manufacturer specifications must be met. If the tray is out of alignment, has developed some issues with care and handling by the users, then the tray would not be appropriate for use. OneTray provides a lifetime warranty on every part of its packaging system. Most hospitals and surgical centers don't send their containers back to the manufacturer. One reason is that it's not free. Two is that they can't afford to be down a tray, taking it out of production. And another reason, no disrespect to mobile instrument repairs, but they take it out into the parking lot and try to remake it. Of course, rarely getting it back to the original manufacturer's specifications. IST has done many studies, independent studies, against our competitors, and we have come out on top with each of those studies.
Thank you. 30-second response from Marcia.
Well, first of all, I think it really comes down to the fact that there are differences in containers, and there's a common factor when it comes to wrap, and the fact is that wraps tear and puncture. The majority of the container surface is basically impenetrable. Our goal, starting as a manufacturer to many of the orthospine companies, made a container that we knew could be transported as a loaner, put into the back of somebody's truck, and basically maintain its integrity over time with multiple handling events.
All right, thank you. This next question goes to Joe first. And the question is, what impact does the stacking of disposable blue wrap have on the integrity of the package itself? And you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Hank. We should look to address all conditions that endanger the sterility of packaging, whether it be the packaging itself or the storage conditions as well. The reality of the matter is you should not just think it's sterile, you should know it's sterile. And whether you stack or not, we do believe you should follow the mantra, when in doubt, throw it out. We have to ask, what's more damaging, a breach that you're aware of or one that you're not? Given the technology and the scientific data available, ignorance is no longer an excuse there. And this goes back to a couple of our central themes, one being moving the science forward, and two being coming to terms with the limitations of each of the packaging methodologies. When talking about wrap and breaches, it's actually critical to talk about the technology and design itself. So wrap is formed by a process called SMS, which is spun bond, melt blown spun bond. And think of it as a sandwich. You have your outer layers, which provide the strength, which are spun bond. You have the media, which is in the middle, which is melt blown, and that keeps the bugs out. And then I don't know about you guys, if you want to put a treatment on your sandwich, Hank, you might like mayo. Mike, you might like mustard. For SMS, it's actually electret. And electret treatment is embedded in the melt blown, and essentially this charges the melt blown, and it functions as a really strong capture and retain for microbes in the wrap. So the treatment maintains these high capture and retention properties through transport, sterilization, and manipulation. And the combination of the melt-blown layer and electret is really key. That technology yields a 99.9% bacterial filtration efficiency. That's actual, purposeful technology. The entire package is designed to be a filter, which is diametric to a container, where anytime you have a breach anywhere outside of the filter itself, there's absolutely nothing in place to inhibit ingress. Containers are designed and they depend on the assumption that you're keeping a seal, and I think it's plain to see that that's just not happening. Maintenance of package integrity is done and required by the FDA on wrap and yields sterile results after a year. While stacking is certainly not desirable and admittedly hard to avoid, I think it's important to think about two things here. Number one is it's not prohibited, and number two, it's not a fait accompli. In other words, just because you stack doesn't mean it's going to tear. Using good logic and best practices will certainly help mitigate that risk. From a product standpoint, there's some really good options out there. There's a high-performance wrap, which is used by 4 out of the 5 top orthopedic hospitals in the country, and modular storage systems such as Balentra, which eliminate stacking and reduce touch points. What your audience should take away is this. 1, there's actual purposeful technology in wrap that inhibits microbes. 2, there's breach identification with wrap. And 3, frankly, there's better options than containers.
All right. Response first from Barbara for 60 seconds.
So if your organization follows the manufacturer's instructions for use when using wrap, you do know that you should not be stacking during storage. For all the on-site visits that I've done personally throughout my surveying career and currently traveling the country, working with a packaging system, Conservatively, I would estimate that 85% of the wrapped trays are stacked in central, on case carts, in OR suites, and in inner cores. In many respects, we are still operating in the wild, wild west where organizations are using products off-label.
And then to Marcia for 60 seconds.
I'd like to agree with your assessment as to the fact that packaging is intended to maintain sterility of an item and protect the contents until it is used. There is no question that it is virtually impossible to penetrate the outer surface of a sealed container and very easy to penetrate the surface of wrap. Furthermore, wrap as a filter has some questionable issues with low spots, and some of the BFE testing that I've seen has shown that it has a BFE of 83 to 86%. So I don't know where the 99% comes into play. The reality is that you have to think of a container really like a bank vault. And the way our container with knife edge fit is constructed, it's a very, very tight seal with clamping latches, offset filter retention plate and holes, so it's virtually impenetrable. I would suggest that anybody who, unfortunately, you can't come to a booth tomorrow, but if you see our container, just try to puncture through the filter. Impossible.
All right. And then Joe, 30 seconds, Joe.
Thought you were going to give me an extra 30 seconds.
Yeah, no free time.
Okay. So I just want to address, Barbara, thank you for the comments. Stacking is not prohibited, actually. With the newest rendition of AMI ST79, it actually points back to the manufacturer IFU as they're tending to do more and more. In our IFU, we've actually updated it to state, to give a precaution around stacking, to really give some guidance that it's not a automatic or mandatory tear. So just wanted to address that first. And to address Marcia in terms of the seals of containers, there's 4 studies out there that suggest otherwise.
Thank you, panelists. Next question will be directed to Barbara. Barbara, what is the tangible difference between an IUSS cycle and a OneTray cycle if water remains inside the container? You have 3 minutes.
Sure. Tangible difference, comparing a OneTray cycle to an IUSS cycle is as similar to comparing an apple and a watermelon. They both have seeds. Let me start off by defining an IUSS cycle. An IUSS cycle is one where the sterilization method that involves the shortest possible time between a sterilized item's removal from the sterilizer and its aseptic transfer to the sterile field. Key concept is that IUSS packaging system is not stored for future use, nor held from one case to another. We've already determined that the industry definition of terminal sterilization permits storage for use at a later time. The difference between IUSS and terminal is one word: storage. OneTray was cleared by the FDA in its 510K with a claim for storage. OneTray has always been a terminal tray by industry's definition. OneTray doesn't have a specific cycle. That's a misnomer. Users should follow the sterility parameters of the medical device IFU, time, temperature, and pressure. The advancement that OneTray has over all, and I repeat, all terminal packaging systems, is that we have the only FDA clearance with 0 dry time and 0 cool time. Dry time has no relevance to achieving 10 to the negative 6 sterility assurance level. Dry time is used to assist in post-sterilization sterility maintenance. Can anybody in this room be able to verify that the items in the packaging systems are sterile, with or without water, or that during storage the contents maintained their sterility? The answer is no. There have been great strides recently in the development of testing materials for cleaning, but all we know about the sterility of the tray is that a Type 5 integrator has reached the acceptable level on the strip. With blue wrap, it's pretty easy to tell because it's visual. There's a hole in the wrapper. But what about rigid container systems? The lid-to-base interface is as important to the sterility of the inner contents as is whether there are breaks in the integrity of the wrap.
Thank you. Now there'll be time for a 60-second response from Marcia.
I hope I can get it all in 60 seconds. First of all, there is absolutely no difference between a OneTray cycle and IUSS. And the 510K from OneTray clearly states just-in-time rapid sterilization, formerly called Flash. So I think it's important that people go online, look at our FDA 510K claims, look at those from OneTray. The other part, too, is all of us as medical device manufacturers or containment device manufacturers must follow ANSI AMI SC77. Clearly, the design of containment devices intended for use in steam sterilization shall provide for adequate drying of contents and commonly available hospital sterilization cycles. Rationale for a terminal sterilization process, there should be no visible moisture present in or on containment devices following any sterilization process.
Thank you. 60-second response from Joe.
Thank you. So the key message here is clear. I think the sterilization community is hardly united on whether this is appropriate. And let's take a step back and make sure this is a responsible advancement of technology, science, and most importantly, patient care. As Marcia mentioned, Amy has long stated any package that appears wet should be reprocessed. AORN and CDC have similar stances. There should be no visible moisture because, as we know, moisture is a pathway for bacteria. And there's even evidence that's published that supports with a high level of spores, steam sterilization efficacy is reduced. More worrisome, though, is the fact that the new technology has not addressed the core fundamental issue of a reliable seal over time. And this is important because as OneTray continues to market longer and longer shelf lives, the math doesn't add up. Moisture plus time plus a non-reliable seal is a very concerning equation. The bottom line is the scientific community is hardly aligned as to whether wet water in a package is okay.
So let me just ask the question, when do you believe one 510K and you don't believe another? I think all of us in this room know that the FDA is the only agency in the United States that clears packaging systems and medical devices. OneTray was cleared in 2006. And happy to tell you that I was one of the authors of the white paper that took Flash and turned it into IUSS. Immediate use steam sterilization did not exist as a concept in 2006.
All right, thank you, panelists. Moving now to our section of rapid fire questions. And this first one starts off with Joe. Does your packaging method save facilities money as compared to the alternatives?
Yes. No, but can we have a... Can we...
60 seconds.
Okay. Can we have an actual conversation about what it really costs to use all these products, a true total cost of ownership view? So often we look at either operational expenditures or capital expenditures or one department's budget rather than a holistic picture. We have to stop compartmentalizing the spend and get a true sense of what it actually costs to use the product. We also can't make these purchases in a vacuum. There is downstream impact. With containers, we must look at the acquisition costs, which can average $600 for the commonly used size, a little bit more for some of the OneTray products. We must also look at repair costs. We must look at replacement costs. Facilities can spend thousands of dollars and not increase their net container inventory because of the year-over-year retirement of non-working or non-functioning containers. We have to ask ourselves, can our departments absorb purchasing another washer? Can we hire another FTE to not lose precious throughput? These are downstream impacts. In the case of OneTray, consumables, $15, can we really absorb that at scale?
Then next to Barbara.
Well, Joe, I'll pick up on your last comment. I don't know that you can afford $15, but if you use enough of them, I'm sure you won't be paying $15 for a filter.
Gonna cut me a deal?
But savings can best be described in an organization, dollars in purchasing redundant instrumentation. Because OneTray can rapidly turn over instrumentation, we are also saving you in utilities. The dry time, eliminating the dry time, what most individuals do not understand, that in a sterilizer, there is water consumption during that 30 to 40 minutes of dry time. And so we're able to save you that as well as electricity. Less disposables as compared to wrap. More productive staff because there's greater efficiencies, not waiting around for dry and cool time. We've already answered the question. You can repair and replace as many times as you need to with a lifetime warranty, and there could be even a decrease in overtime so that you don't have two levels of staffs, the OR as well as central, waiting around for trays to be finished.
All right, to Marcia.
Okay, there's no question that most containers save money over wrap. Our Stereotype container saves more money than any other container on the market because, first of all, it's universal. That means you can use it for any method of sterilization. We're also cleared for internal and external stacking, which reduces your container inventory. Furthermore, with the compatibility of low temperature and steam sterilization, the one model serves all of your needs, irrespective of what type of sterilization method you're using and also what type of device you're placing within it. Our return on investment is very short, and the lifetime of our container is very long. We have customers that have our containers now for nearly 18 to 20 years, and they're still functioning as new. Again, you must use a pH-neutral detergent to keep them clean. And most importantly, we offer a modular system of instrument trays and components to protect your devices during transport and storage, and that alone saves you a lot of money. And I'm just going to reiterate, the cost for our disposables is 50 cents maximum per use.
All right,
A
thank you.
tremendous cost savings over wrap and certainly over the
That's
other product
time.
that's being discussed today.
The first rebuttal goes to Joe for 30 seconds.
So I think it's really important to understand what we're spending to use these products, right? Repairs are often a black hole. How much are we paying to do that? The consumables do exist. They are less than wrap, but the acquisition cost is higher. This is something where if we're being true stewards of our business, we have to understand what we're spending across departments and across budgets. And frankly, if the product isn't performing as clinically intended, we have a bigger problem to answer. You can't put a price on patient safety.
To Barbara.
So I totally agree with what Joe just said. The cost standard has too many intangibles in it currently. If you ask what the true cost is, most facilities would not have a clue. Facilities don't know even how much it would cost to reprocess a tray. The literature says it's approximately $44 a tray to reprocess. But until industry becomes the cost standard, there are too many intangible factors. And we talked about financial incentives and initiatives, but we lack the ability to figure it out.
To Marcia for 30 seconds.
Rebuttal?
Correct.
Yes, ma'am.
I think there's no question that containers save money over wrap, but there are containers like ours that are universal, highly durable, have a very tight seal, have clamping action, have filter retention plates that don't fall off, have a tortuous path built into the design so that microorganisms that are not smart enough to turn corners and go through a maze are left out of the product. So there are differences, and also the whole idea of maintaining the product, washing it, keeping it clean, inspecting is important.
Thank you, panelists. The next question, we're going to follow the same order and the same times. So first question will go, the first response will go to Joe again. The question is, what environmental concerns does your perspective address? 60 seconds.
Thanks, Mike. So before we dive into this, I think it's really important to dimension the actual problem. Healthcare waste makes up less than 1% of all municipal waste. 1%. So that said, specific to RAP, we have decreased our environmental footprint with programs such as Blue Renew, which allows facilities to recycle their clean, used RAP and keep it out of landfill. Since 2008, that program has kept 18 million pounds RAP out of landfill and freed up 270,000 cubic yards of space. So in other words, think 55 million milk gallon jugs taken out of landfill. That's what that program has done. Bluecon resin is another new innovation which extends the life cycle of RAP by turning it into basins, totes, really anything plastic. When we consider the resources needed to reprocess containers, healthcare design tells us it takes 570 gallons of water per bed per day is in use in healthcare facilities. We have to think about both sides of the ledger. As a manufacturer of single-use products, we have mitigated our impact. Can the panel say the same?
Same question to Barbara, 60 seconds.
With the elimination of dry time with a OneTray, we have a greener product. We use less energy, there's less trash as compared to RAP. We've proven that there is savings of gallons of water, as I've already mentioned, by eliminating the dry time. One particular facility put a meter on their sterilizer and was able to prove that in 3 loads, they saved 180 gallons of water. It's almost impossible to quantify environmental concerns when cost mechanisms and structures don't exist in the industry to make these comparisons. We can verbalize what we think, but until a majority of healthcare systems and organizations can quantify their expenditures, it's impossible to answer this question with an objective answer.
Thank you. Next question to Marcia.
Consider that containers are reusable and metals are recyclable. Compare that with RAP, which is a disposable. It's a disposable that is not biodegradable. Furthermore, Case Medical is a sustainable manufacturer. Everything that we do is based on keeping our environment, keeping our world safe. We're a Safer Choice Partner of the Year. We meet the requirements of the Chemical Footprint Project. We endorse the use of reusable containers, but I am very concerned about containers where we are stating that there's no need to dry them. And I don't understand the idea of millions of tons or whatever of water to dry a container. Drying is the elimination of moisture. And I just want to comment that how do you know that a container, or even an instrument set, was properly cleaned or decontaminated beforehand? Also, that sterilization is a statistical concept. And in both cases, one, it's not safe because it hasn't been dried. In the other, it's not a renewable product.
Thank you. Now will be time for rebuttals. First rebuttal go to Joe, 30 seconds.
Thanks. So I do want to agree with Barbara. We need to establish a universal bioburden index. Attempts have been made before looking at reusable fabrics versus disposable and actually showed disposable fabrics are friendlier on the environment. We need to further that research. As far as, I was under the impression we're representing the medium as a whole, but from a manufacturing standpoint, Halyard keeps 99.7% of our stuff out of landfill from our manufacturing sites. So we also are very green and continue to be that way and strive for more.
Thank you. 30-second rebuttal from Barbara.
I think I'll just reiterate what I've already said, and that is until we develop a standardized mechanism to look at how we are spending our money, how we are basing the cost structure in our facilities, and come up with some kind of a system to approach this, we're just shooting pie in the sky numbers out there.
Thank you. 30-second rebuttal from Marcia.
First of all, if anyone is interested, please contact me tomorrow or the next day. We'll do an ROI. We'll show you how we'll save a tremendous amount of money going to a reusable container that's durable and sustainable, of how you can process product quicker. We have a pending 510K for a 5 to 8 minute dry time. I do believe that dry is safe for patients. And as I said in my little bio, I'd rather lose a customer than lose a patient. I can sleep at night because my containers are dry.
All right, thank you. I know it will surprise the room to know we're nearing the end of this discussion already. The time has flown by, but we do have a final question, and then we'll move toward the summary statements. This will start first for Joe. What is the biggest unanswered question that has come up during tonight's panel discussion?
So if I was a CS manager or a clinician responsible for patient outcomes, I'd have 3 questions. How do I ensure that I'm getting a reliable seal over time with my rigid containers? 2, how do I do proper visible checks that represent the efficacy of the product? And 3, how do I reconcile the true burden of ownership? Containers cost more than you think from a financial, from an environmental, and from an efficiency standpoint, and I think we need to have a good, rational conversation about that. All things considered, wrap is the superior packaging method, and clinically speaking, we've discussed 4 different studies that would suggest that.
To Barbara for 60 seconds.
Thank you. We've got many practices that we've bought into over the years, but yet there's little to no scientific evidence. There are many contradictory statements in the industry. Evidence of this lack of certainty is the use of should, would, can, may. Must is rarely used, yet we tell users to follow the manufacturer's instructions. Why is this a should statement as opposed to a must statement? There's a lot of confusion in the field. Many practices are not supported by scientific evidence, and guidance is not up to date with current technologies. Just ask those of us that sit at AMI ST79, how many years did it take for the new edition to be printed? Updates occur over a span of years. Think about it. Apple can send off updates routinely for our phones.
All right, to Marcia for 60 seconds.
Of course, technology is changing, but so is scientific data and empirical information. There are studies that have been done for marketing purposes. The one that Joe is talking about, we can go through and talk about how some of the bacteria or the spores that were used can go right through his own filter. We can also talk about the way that wrap costs money because it's a continued expense. It's not a reusable expense. You even have to pay for disposal of it. And I think one needs to look at the quality of the packaging material itself. But I think the biggest unanswered question tonight is it's safe to use wet loads for future use. Clearly, what does a wet load mean? And why do some folks feel that it's safe for storage? And don't you realize when assessing risk that dry is safer than wet?
The first rebuttal goes to Joe for 30 seconds.
Thanks. So Barbara had mentioned lack of scientific evidence. I would actually counter again. We've talked about 4 studies, of which only 1 were sponsored by Halyard, the ARA study. The Dunkelberg study was not peer-reviewed. AGIC, the Cavan study was not. The Lambert study was not. As far as recycling, just to level set, you don't have to pay for that. That's something that we are able to facilitate. And the bacteria going through the filter, we can have that conversation, but that's wrapped past that test as well. Thank you.
And to Barbara for 30 seconds.
Well, let's talk about wet packs. So as I've mentioned already this evening, there's limited evidence. Limited evidence doesn't give you much to hang your hat on that there's a problem with it for a microbial path. However, if you look at AORN and you look at AMI, both current documents, they're contradictory statements. For example, limited evidence, yet in another section, AORN tells the user to develop policies and procedures for rigid containers with retained moisture. Which statement do you agree with? Same thing with multiple references in ST79. Annex H, which has now been created. Read what Annex H says, which is listed as informative.
Thank you. And to Marcia for 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to make this one really quickly. You mentioned the CDC. What does the CDC say about when sterile items open to the air, they will become contaminated? Thus, there is a longer risk the longer that item is exposed to the air. And when there's moisture, moisture is a wick for the growth of microorganisms. So yes, my container is sterile. when you, if there's any moisture inside. I just think that the safety issue pertains to what about the devices that you're putting on the back table? What is the issues related to when you open the container itself in a hospital environment, which is a community of ill people? Contamination.
Thank you, panelists. We've entered the final phase of our discussion. We will now allow 3 minutes to each panelist for summary statements, and we're going to go in reverse order from how we opened. So the first 3-minute segment goes to Barbara.
ASCs and hospitals have long struggled with the problem of providing one standard of care to each and every patient. With increasing surgical volumes, healthcare organizations have an increasingly difficult time meeting the demands of medical device sterilization. Historically, it was customary for instrument trays that had been previously terminally sterilized to be reused again later in the day for other patients by subjecting them to immediate use steam sterilization. In 2006, the OneTray sealed sterilization container was cleared by the FDA to be used to hold temperature-tolerant medical devices during steam sterilization cycles and then be stored. Another rigid container system? Hardly, not at all. Packaging systems had a breakthrough in technology, not since the 70s. The development of a scientifically engineered product that moves steam better through the container to the hardest areas in a rigid container system was a significant advancement. The design of the tray increases airflow volumes, allowing steam to quickly reach the lateral edges of the tray. Unique only to a OneTray in the healthcare marketplace, the FDA cleared this packaging system with no dry time, no cool time, and storage. Staff can now react to changes quickly during the day schedule or addressing on-call situations when dealing with emergent needs. I'm surprised by some of Marcia's comments this evening, because Marcia and I have already debated this at an open public session at Amy ST 79. And I'm here to tell you that Amy ST 79 certainly did not change its position. It cannot go against what the FDA has cleared. Although opinions are worthwhile, they are not objective, and they're not based in reality when it comes to clearance documents. Reduction of purchasing redundant instrumentation is realized when using OneTray due to the ability to turn trays quicker. Replacing of older equipment at the end of its useful life can also be decreased, as the inventory may now be enough when using OneTray. Do not allow wrapped trays or other containers with required dry and cool times, insufficient instrumentation, late arriving vendor trays, additional surgical volume to interfere with the surgical schedule. OneTray is the solution to keep your surgical schedule running smoothly. OneTray's economic gain comes from the elimination of dry and cool time. The newest advancement in rigid container technology, and it's a major integral addition to many successful and safe quality surgical programs. Organizations have a choice. Choose one standard of care for each and every one of your patients.
Thank you. 3 minutes to Joe.
Thanks. First, I want to thank the Beyond Clean team. Sincerely, it's an honor for you guys to have invited me here, and also the panel. Thank you, Marcia and Barbara. Nice job. Managed not to hurt each other with our retractors.
Thank you.
So we talked about
Yes, thank you for that.
We
Yeah.
talked about 3 things tonight. 1, the lack of having reliable seal with containers. 2, the lack of breach identification. And 3, coming to terms with the true burden of ownership. As new science becomes available, we must take advantage of it. Let's not let the regulatory hammer of Joint Commission or the FDA drop. Let's not wait for something like this to appear on the cover of USA Today. I think we can all agree that our #1 main goal is to get a sterile tray to the OR 100% of the time. When science becomes available that lets us know the status quo is no longer dependable or reliable, and new technology offers new options, we should run, not walk, to explore those. There's no reliable way to identify a breach in a container, period. I think it's also time to come to terms with the true burden of ownership. Financially speaking, I would challenge us to break outside of our silos, departmental, and budgets, and really look at the true cost of ownership with these products. Are we thinking about buying another washer? Are we thinking about hiring another FTE? Are we thinking about the replacement and the repair cost? We fully acknowledge the reality that many of you probably use some mix of wrap and containers in your facility, so we encourage you to continue the dialogue, encourage your peers to continue the dialogue, go back to your facility, and challenge the status quo. All things considered, wrap remains the superior packaging system. I would once again like to thank the Beyond Clean team and the panel of guests here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. 3 minutes to Marcia.
At the end of the day, we're not talking about packaging. We're talking about patient safety. We're talking about the fact that it's important for those of you that are considering a packaging method to make a risk assessment on which is safer for your patients. And when it comes to sealed containers, there's no question that sealed containers are virtually impenetrable. A breach of wrap is easy. The tears in the wrap or the punctures, we all know about them. They're easy to find. The other thing is, when you think about it, if our goal is truly patient safety and welfare, you want to use the products with the least risk and the best track record available. Everything else is just marketing. The words, the statements, even some of the studies that were set up, not as a scientific study, but to make a point. And it was interesting, I was listening last night to Amanda Carpenter talking about her new book called Gaslighting. And I got really curious, what does gaslighting mean? It's a form of manipulation that seeks to sow seeds of doubt and distrust in a group, to question even their sanity. Come on, guys. Everybody here knows that a dry outcome is safer than a wet outcome.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. Justin?
Well, I personally am really impressed with the preparation of the panelists, and I want to make sure we give them a round of applause. They're brave to come up here all at once today. I think Joe was trying to win some points, throwing some thanks to us. Thank you, Joe.
This is scored, okay.
Yeah, we didn't score it, but you know. So I do want to say at the very beginning, we talked about learning and listening from each other, and that was really the whole point of bringing this panel discussion together. I'm looking out in the crowd, I'm seeing all the people that registered for this event and came, and I want you to know we want to continue that discussion through Beyond Clean, through the podcast, and we've said it a lot on the show. If you have, future recommendations for guests or topics that you'd like us to cover, all you have to do is send an email to info@beyondclean.net. Another thing I want to say is just thanks to Hank and Mike. They've been really awesome in putting this project together. They're the brains behind it. I'm the voice. They're the brains behind it, and it's just been an incredible project over the last 9 months. So I want to thank everybody for attending the first ever Beyond Clean panel discussion here at the 2018 ISHM Annual Conference and Expo. Once again, we'd like to recognize all of our past guests that are in attendance tonight and extend our warmest appreciation to the sponsors who helped make it possible. Northfield Medical, Ascendco, Logiequip, Ready Set Surgical, Ultra Clean, Sklar Instruments, and New Trace. And obviously our panelists tonight who put a lot of work into this and came and sat down and really had this open discussion with us. I want another round of applause for the panelists. All right, enjoy the rest of the conference and keep fighting dirty.